Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. We begin today with the question of just how close the U.S. and Iran really are to a deal to end the war. Right now, U.S. officials and mediators are signaling the two sides are nearing a final agreement after President Trump proclaimed yesterday the war is over and said a signing ceremony for a memorandum of understanding with Iran could happen as soon as this weekend. Specific text of that agreement has not been released publicly by either side, but multiple sources tell NBC News the agreement would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, extend the ceasefire, and take steps toward addressing Iran's nuclear program, some of which would begin immediately upon signing. This morning, President Trump lashed out at Tehran after Iranian state media reported the preliminary agreement did not include commitments about Iran's nuclear program and that the U.S. had agreed to give Iran billions of dollars before it made firm commitments. President Trump accusing Iran of not dealing in good faith and warning, quote, they better get their act together and fast. It was a stark contrast to the president's more conciliatory tone yesterday when he touted the preliminary agreement. Take a look.
We just made a great settlement of the war with Iran, and we're going to be subject to finalization of documents, which should get done over the next few days.
I don't know if you heard, but we ended the war with Iran today, and they have agreed never to have a nuclear weapon.
Iran's foreign minister saying the two sides have, quote, never been closer, but stopping short of announcing a final deal. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who has been serving as a mediator between Washington and Tehran, saying today, quote, a final agreed-upon text of the peace deal has been reached, and Pakistan is now working closely with both sides to finalize the next steps. Whether this is finally the beginning or the end of the conflict remains an open question, and this optimism from the president comes after he has repeatedly claimed for months now that the war was ending.
We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete. And we've won. Let me say, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won.
Iran is something that was essentially largely over in 2 or 3 days. We've won this. This war has been won. The war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want, and it should be ending pretty soon.
Sir, did you say 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks?
2 or 3 days.
You'll be signing a peace agreement?
No, we have a good chance of doing it. We should be able to do it in 1 hour, if you want to know the truth.
Joining me now, NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Richard Engel, and NBC News Senior National Security correspondent Courtney Cubie. Monica, let me start with you at the White House. This developing news, President Trump saying that a deal is imminent. What are you learning about the details of this preliminary agreement, Monica?
And look, Kristen, we have heard that before repeatedly, as you just played. So it's unclear whether there's any actual meaningful momentum here or if this is another instance of the U.S. trying to project this cautious optimism that things could be coming together toward a deal. But we are getting a little bit more information from a senior administration official about what could be in here if this ultimately is signed. And essentially, this would reopen the Strait of Hormuz if there's agreement. It would lift the current U.S. naval blockade. It would lead to the eventual dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program and to the U.S. securing Iran's enriched uranium. But when we were able to press senior administration officials on exactly how that would work over what kind of period of time, officials basically said that they were still figuring out the answers to all of that. So I think that tells you a lot about this current moment as well, Kristen. We do know that there is obviously the desire to get to a deal here, it seems, but some of those major sticking points are still outstanding. And it is the president who just yesterday threatened potentially more strikes against Iran, only to then say that he had canceled them, instead trying to talk about this diplomatic effort. So again, this could all switch on a dime. It's unclear, but the White House trying to say that this is different, that this isn't the same case that we've been hearing about with this familiar pattern for weeks now.
Well, you take me to my next question, Monica, because the president said yesterday the war is over. So let me ask you about this memorandum of understanding. Would it effectively end the war, Monica, or would it hit the pause button?
exactly that. It would basically kickstart a 60-day period of intensive technical negotiations that still could collapse or could fall apart. But it would also extend the ceasefire for 60 days. But as you know, Kristen, as you've been discussing repeatedly, and even in your interview with the president last week, this ceasefire itself has been tested over and over again in recent days. So extending a ceasefire doesn't mean that there couldn't also then be another example of U.S. military strikes. So that is another major question to all of this, too.
And Monica, before I let you go, the president saying the signing could actually take place this weekend in Europe. We know he's traveling to the G7 summit in France. What are you learning about that, Monica?
Yeah, and the president yesterday said that he couldn't make it there this weekend because of his commitments here with that major UFC fight scheduled for Sunday evening, and then he is supposed to leave after that for the G7 summit in France. So he suggested that it would be Vice President Vance who would actually go and attend this signing of the memorandum of understanding, of this initial tentative framework. But it's unclear whether that is actually going to take place. Iranian state media had sort of cast doubt on whether that could really materialize this weekend. And the location is also still an open question mark. But it does sound like, given the vice president's role so far in the negotiations, the fact that he went to Islamabad, Pakistan once to take part in those negotiations means that that is why he would be the one to go and do this initial phase, though, again, that part is still up in the air.
All right, Monica Albed, a very rainy White House for us. Monica, thank you very much. Richard, let me turn to you now in the region. What are your sources telling you about this moment? Because you and I have had this conversation before with a deal potentially imminent, and then it falls apart. You heard Monica address that. What are your sources telling you about how real this one might be, Richard?
Well, negotiators today were very worried. There was a lot of miscommunication today, and it seems to have begun when one Iranian news outlet, there's not just one state media, there's several semi-official channels, published a 14-point plan saying that this was the plan that everyone had agreed to. And President Trump and others read it and said that it wasn't like the plan that had been discussed. And you mentioned in your introduction that President Trump lashed out. The Iranians then, through the foreign minister, denied that 14-point plan, and they said that people should not be spreading false information. We also saw the Pakistanis chime in saying people shouldn't be spreading false information. This is he didn't exactly deny the 14 points, but he seemed to be referencing it. He said we shouldn't mislead the public and that the two sides have never been closer to a deal. And then President Trump forwarded that same denial by the Iranian foreign minister, who said that those 14 points were inaccurate and that the two sides have never been close to a deal. So what we saw today was a lot of people trying to defend this process, but not a lot of details coming out about what it specifically says. But people were concerned that it would fall apart as tensions remain very high.
And of course, you have Israel watching what's happening very closely. The prime minister talking to President Trump. Let me read you something that Israel's defense minister posted on social media today, Richard. Quote, Israel must ensure that in the future as well, we will have the ability to act independently to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and I have instructed the IDF to prepare accordingly. As you noted, Richard, Israel's not a party to this agreement. So is there concern that the actions by Israel could actually derail a potential deal?
Well, you said it all in that brief sentence. Israel isn't officially a party to the deal, but of course Israel is a party to the deal. The United States and Israel launched this war together. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, who launched the initial attack that killed the now late Supreme Leader, who was replaced by his son. Now the Israelis are taking a less prominent role as they are focusing on Lebanon. But the Lebanon conflict is also part of this wider conflict. And according to some details that are emerging, as part of the extended ceasefire that should go into effect if and when this memorandum of understanding is signed, that Lebanon, that ceasefire should also extend to Lebanon. But it is not clear that Israel will abide by that ceasefire, that Prime Minister Netanyahu will stop attacking Hezbollah or pull out the thousands of Israeli troops in South Lebanon. Just the opposite. He has said that he will not do that he sees Hezbollah as an existential threat to this country. And then the post you just mentioned a short while ago, where Israel wants to continue to maintain the ability to carry out independent actions, including against Iran.
All right, Richard Engel reporting for us from Jerusalem. Richard, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Let me turn now to Courtney Cubie, who's here on set with me. Courtney, thanks for being here. So you have this new really remarkable reporting about the military being about 3 hours away from carrying out strikes when President Trump pulled that back and said, no, we're not going to strike Iran. We're now close to getting a deal. Talk about the impact and the significance of that.
And I think some viewers might look at that and think, okay, so they were 3 hours away from pushing a button, but that's not the case here. In this case, there was a plan for manned aircraft to be up there carrying out some of these strikes that President Trump first announced on social media yesterday morning. So what that means is you had men and women on aircraft carriers there in the region who they spent the day getting their orders approved, getting their marching orders for what to do. The aircraft, the air operations plan was modified to make sure that they had the aircraft ready to go when they needed them. Munitions were loaded onto those aircraft. The pilots sat in the ready room and got all ready to go. I mean, they were ready to go and fly. And we can't forget, flying manned aircraft into Iran is extremely dangerous still. Yes, a lot of their military capabilities have been taken out, but that is a very hostile environment. It's a dangerous job. So 3 hours before they were supposed to literally start dropping those bombs on Iran, they were told via social media that their plans were being changed. It's a really remarkable turn of events, and the military is able to flex and to adjust. But this is just not the way that this is generally done.
Well, it's incredible to hear you lay out the details of it and the potential impact. President Trump, Court, is basically saying the war is over. From a military perspective, though, is that the case? How's the Pentagon viewing this moment?
They are ready to carry out as exactly what happened yesterday. They were not planning to carry out large-scale strikes, as President Trump announced on social media. But when he put that out there in the morning, they got ready. They have strike packages that are ready all the time. They modified and adjusted them, and they were ready to go. If President Trump were to decide to restart major combat operations, which he seems to waver back and forth on whether he's going to strike or not, the military is there and they're ready to do it. But again, it's this uncertainty that it's just difficult for men and women who are already deployed. Many of them have been deployed for months. It just introduces this element of uncertainty to their days.
Speaking of this element of uncertainty, after President Trump had announced that a deal was within reach, the military shot down Iranian drones. Talk about what happened there.
Within literally hours of the president making this announcement again on social media, Iran launched drones at commercial ships. And this comes when we know that the U.S. military they're not escorting ships through, but they are helping coordinate them. And they're bringing ships through this sort of safe passageway that's close to where the U.S. military is operating. So with that, they're able to put up their own aircraft, and they're able to have surveillance boats and various kinds of aircraft up that can help these ships if they come under fire, as they did. So again, it just shows how the back and forth nature of this. The U.S. military shot 2 of those drones down. There were reports of additional projectiles being fired as well.
Well, just remarkable. Court, stay with us because we want to get your take on another developing story as we turn to the war, to a key surveillance tool that's set to expire tonight after Congress failed to reauthorize it. We're talking about Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which gives American spy agencies sweeping powers to gather data on foreigners located outside the U.S. without getting a warrant first. Lawmakers and national security officials say it's a vital tool for law enforcement to help prevent terror attacks. Democrats blocked its reauthorization after the president tapped a loyalist without intel experience to temporarily act as the DNI. Lawmakers are now trying to fast-track the confirmation process for a new, more qualified permanent replacement, which the president nominated yesterday. Court's still here to help me break all of this down. So if this program, the FISA program, expires tonight, what would happen? Does it actually go dark?
So most likely not, because there was a court order in March that essentially extended the authority. So it should be the powers, the surveillance authorities should still be in place until actually March of 2027. But that being said, the fact that this vote, 19 Republicans joined the Democrats to vote against this. Every time this comes up, FISA reauthorization comes up, there is always concern among intelligence officials that it's not going to pass and they're going to lose out on this authority, the surveillance capability. And that causes intelligence officials, career people, not politicals necessarily, career people, that concerns them because there is a tremendous amount of intelligence that is gleaned from this capability. But of course, privacy advocates have warned for years that it has the potential to be abused and they can overstep and even potentially surveil Americans as part of it.
Well, and Republicans are saying that Section 702 accounts for 50% of U.S. intelligence. So how significant would it be if it were to lapse?
And we hear that from intelligence professionals, too, including during prior times when they were trying to reauthorize it. So we'll often hear that more than half of the president's PDB, for instance, comes from information that's gleaned from FISA. I think one of the bigger concerns that we hear from intelligence professionals, yes, that is a concern, is that there have been cases where FISA has allowed them to actually disrupt potential terrorist plots, to find the potential. One that they often point to is in 2022 when they were able to find a terrorist in Afghanistan and kill him. And so the bigger concern is the impact it could really have on the safety and security of Americans at home and abroad. But again, every couple of years we go through this where there's a concern and it comes very close to not passing. But this is the first time where it really does seem there's going to be another vote probably on June 23rd when the House comes back. But it really does seem like they are at an impasse and may not be able to get a vote to get this across.
Well, and of course, the World Cup kicks off tonight. Are there any security concerns related to FISA potentially expiring?
And not just the World Cup. I mean, it is the U.S. D.C. is about to celebrate America 250. We have all these enormous events starting this weekend with the UFC and continuing for the next several weeks. There's events up in New York City and across the country. This is a time where they could be using this authority to really watch and make sure that there's no one coming in with any kind of nefarious intent. Now, again, privacy advocates would argue there are other methods that the U.S. has and uses and that are able to uncover these kinds of plots. But again, career officials, not just political officials in the intelligence community, would tell you that this is a really critical capability for them.
All right, Courtney Kube, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Great to see you. Coming up, Texas Senator John Cornyn speaks out, the Republicans' candid warning for President Trump and his party after losing his bid for re-election to a Trump-backed challenger, plus weighing in. We'll take you behind the scenes at the White House where final preparations are underway for this weekend's unprecedented UFC event. And we'll dig deeper into the political fights outside the ring over the president's power, the Kennedy Center, and much more. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now on this Friday. Welcome back. Republican Senator John Cornyn is speaking out extensively for the very first time since his primary defeat to Trump-backed challenger Ken Paxton. In a wide-ranging interview with the New York Times, the longtime Texas senator issued a warning about the midterms and predicting a, quote, miserable final 2 years for President Trump. He said, quote, "I don't say that with any sort of desire for vengeance. I just think that's the way it's going to be. He's going to have the most miserable 2 years of his life in the last 2 years of his term. I think, because I think November is going to be a disaster," Cornyn told the Times. Joining me now is today's panel, Francesca Chambers, White House correspondent for USA Today, Mo Alithi, Democratic strategist and executive director of Georgetown's Institute of Politics and Public Service, and Mark Bednar, Republican strategist who served as communications director for now Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy when he was a member of Congress. Thank you all for being here. A lot to unpack today. But let's start, Francesca, with this interview that the Times did with Senator John Cornyn. I thought it was incredibly revealing because he's candid about the fact that he, among other Republicans who have clashed with, who feel jilted by President Trump, are not necessarily going to get in line anymore.
Yeah, Cornyn uncorked for sure, Kristen. And what's so fascinating to me about this interview is that after he lost to Ken Paxton, I was hearing from folks on Capitol Hill that, you know, he's not part of this YOLO caucus. He's in a different situation as Senators Cassidy and Tillis. This sounds like he's part of the YOLO caucus now when he's saying things about having leverage and cards to play. I mean, Mark, you worked on Capitol Hill. You tell me, but this sounded a little different than what we've heard from him in the past.
It seems like, Mark, look, he's warning this could be a disastrous, not only midterm election cycle for President Trump, but legislative cycle. Do you think that that's accurate?
Well, there's a couple things to unpack here. First of all, we have a lot of rising stars in the Republican Party. Stephanie Bice, Ashley Hinson, Guy Reschenthaler, Brian Jack. I could go on and on for the rest of the show. I'm very excited for the New York Times to do their profile on them to get their vision for the future, the vision of the MAGA movement. That being said, Senator Cornyn's portentous comments here, what I wish he really would have done was actually elaborate. Should Democrats actually take the House or potentially the Senate? Why is that? Why would that make things miserable? Well, we know that they would work to impeach him. They would work to try to undo his economic agenda, et cetera. And at every step of the way, I don't think it's any secret. I don't think that that is actually a revelation here for Republicans to view that this is what Democrats would do should they win. Like that, of course, that doubles down the efforts that Republicans need to have, you know, with the money and the message to get out there and preserve these majorities.
Mo, weigh in on that point, because I've actually heard an internal debate amongst Democrats. Should they win back the House? Should Democrats move to impeach President Trump? Some Democrats say absolutely not. It will only embolden him, while others say it should be the first course that they take.
Yeah, I half agree. They're not going to move to impeach him.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think there will be some members who will try, but I don't think leadership. There will be oversight, right? You'll see hearings, but I don't think you're going to see an impeachment. But they are 1,000% going to work, you're right, to overturn the president's economic agenda, because it's been a disastrous economic agenda for most people. The president is way underwater on the economy. He's incredibly unpopular on the economy and hasn't too busy doing other things than focusing on that. So that's where I think you're going to see them go.
If he doesn't get impeached, if Democrats do win, Mark, is the president effectively a lame duck president if Democrats win the House? I mean, does that render him incapable of getting any legislation passed?
Well, we've seen in the first term, I think it was actually Pelosi and Schumer's big mistake. I think there was a big opportunity to actually work with President Trump. He was a first-term president. There was a lot of kind of room to grow there. You know, obviously right now, both sides are very calcified in their positions. So outside of executive action, I really don't see an instance where Democrats are going to say, hey, Mr. President, at the end of your second term, let's give you a W. I don't see that happening.
But I will say this. I mean, this president with a Republican Congress has made it clear he doesn't think he needs Congress, right? He's not going to Congress for a lot of things. He's doing things by executive order now. The difference between now and what may happen with the Democratic control is Congress won't go along with it.
So, Mo, you set me up perfectly for the next part of the discussion, because, Francesca, President Trump has not gone to Congress for this military action that he's taken in Iran. Obviously, a number of Democrats and some Republicans say that he needs to, particularly if he wants to continue military action. And as we sit here and have this conversation today, President Trump says a deal is imminent. He said that a number of times. But I wonder, does this moment feel different to you, because you do have the Iranian foreign minister say a memorandum of understanding is closer than it's ever been?
Well, that's true, but you also have the administration saying publicly, Kristen, that not to believe what you're seeing, you know, in the media, and what you're apparently seeing on social media from the Iranians, that the deal points, that some of them that we've seen aren't quite correct. So it's still very, very unclear. But I will say, to your point, I asked the president yesterday when I was in the Oval Office about what the timeline for this even looks like, because a memorandum of understanding is not the same as a final agreement. There are so many details that would need to be worked out, including on the enriched uranium and who's going to get that out and how quickly that comes out. And the president said, I don't want to put a timeline on this, or rather, I don't want to put a deadline on this, because then you'll come back to me and say that I missed the deadline. So we have no idea how long this would even take to negotiate.
And the president's hawkish allies want to see, if there is a memorandum of understanding, they want to see an agreement to address Iran's nuclear enrichment program, Mark?
Absolutely. That is, first and foremost, that's the most important thing in any negotiation with Iran.
Yeah.
And of course, we saw Vice President Vance draw a red line that they will not be getting cash out of this. So there's going to be some major priorities that the administration is going to focus on. But of course, the Republican Party and the American people writ large, they're rooting for a win here. They want this wrapped up. Let's reopen that strait. Let's calm energy markets. The president is very focused on this, and that's good. This is encouraging. But of course, we don't know anything until, the dotted line is signed.
Absolutely. And Mo, the president insists once this war is over, gas prices, he says, are going to continue or will drop like a rock, he says. What do you make of that, and what are the implications for Democrats?
I hope that's true. But again, the devil's in the details. When will this war be over?
Yeah.
Because to Francesca's point, even some of the information we've heard today is that once the memorandum is signed, then we go into a 60 or 90-day period to take care of all the technical details of the deal. This thing isn't going to be wrapped up for 3 months, possibly. That's getting really close to the midterm elections.
Well, Mark, it is, and all of it comes as the president prepares to mark his 80th birthday. This weekend, he's going to have a big UFC fight in the White House. Some Republicans, Democrats say inflation reached its highest level in 3 years this week, that the optics are not right. What say you about that?
Well, he can do those things concurrently. There's only one president in world history that is in the World Wrestling Hall of Fame. I'll let you all guess who that is. But it's good for our country, especially in our 250th year, for a president to like sports, to engage in the culture. That's a good thing. Of course, are there economic issues that we need to address immediately and to continue to pound that drum? Absolutely. But this is a good moment for the country.
Mark?
Mo.
I'm calling you Mark. Mo.
Should be able to do both at the same time. He's not. He's not addressing the cost of living. He's not addressing gas prices. He's not addressing grocery prices. I have no problem with him being a sports fan or a UFC fan, and I don't even have a problem with him throwing a big party for himself featuring the UFC. I do have a problem with the fact that the Trump organization is making money off of it. UFC isn't, but the Trump organization is. They're selling merch around this thing, all while people are suffering at the gas pumps.
Francesca, final question to you. What is the White House saying about the swirl around this UFC event? And you've been there reporting on it every day. It is quite a remarkable structure.
They're arguing that the taxpayer isn't paying for this, but of course, between security and other things like that, of course, critics are saying the taxpayer is footing some of the bill for this, of course. Notably, it could rain on Sunday during this time, so I'm not quite sure how that'll play out. I tried to ask the president about that yesterday and didn't get an answer, unfortunately.
Okay, well, we'll watch the weather and we'll watch this event. Thank you for a great conversation. Really appreciate it, Francesca, Mo, and Mark. Coming up next, the fate of the war, the Trump agenda, and the future of the Democratic Party as it grapples with a controversial Senate candidate in Maine. My one-on-one with Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman, an outspoken Democrat on all those topics and much more. Stay with us. This is Meet the Press Now. Welcome back, and joining me now is Pennsylvania Democratic Senator John Fetterman. Senator Fetterman, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for having me here.
Well, we have a lot to get to. Let's start off with the midterms. We are 5 months out from the general election in November. Leader Chuck Schumer says he is confident Democrats have multiple paths to flip the Senate. Do you share his confidence, Senator?
Well, I am. We have fantastic candidates all across the map with Maine, except for Maine. And you have we have great choice in Texas. We have the legend of Brown in Ohio, and we have Cooper in North Carolina, and we have Turek in Iowa. And then we have a great candidate in Alaska. We've put a lot of things, in play. And, Trump has made, anything possible for Democrats in this cycle because I know there is significant backlash and everybody's already assumed that the House will flip. But that's history. Regardless who's in power, the House usually always changes. But here we are now, after what the president decided to do, and jam corn I don't understand, other than that quote, saying sometimes a man just wants to see the world burn, and do that and create that extra drama in Texas.
Well, we'll be watching Texas closely. I have to ask you about Graham Platner. You just talked about the Maine race. I don't have to tell you, Senator, I know you've talked about this, but his campaign has been plagued by controversies, including allegations of physically aggressive behavior in past relationships. Now, he denies ever being violent. You have called him a creep. You've said people are rightfully concerned about his behavior. Some of your Democratic colleagues, though, say that they... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, he's a bona fide dirtbag. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, all of the, the Nazi tattoo and the insane things that he said online, whether he roughs up, former girlfriends, for all of these things, what's his resume, honestly, look at what the Democrats, we have great candidates. Do you know what the Republicans have? They can go after Tallarico about he doesn't eat enough meat, or about pronouns kind of drama or whatever thing. I mean, look at this. They have nothing on Brown or Cooper or in Peltola in Alaska, or for across the map here. Now, this is the situation that we are, and that's why that we have enough in play, and that's why I would certainly be optimistic that we have multiple paths at this point.
Senator, though, what do you say?
Ossoff too.
Yeah, you have John Ossoff.
Ossoff too.
He's
untouchable down in Georgia. He's definitely going to run. He's definitely going to win, without a doubt. In fact, Ossoff, it took Georgia off any real concern. Yes, of course, we'll have to spend money, and he'll do the work. But absolutely. And again, North Carolina, that's money in the bank, too. In fact, they've actually just shifted that now over to lean Democrat. And Brown is the kind of guy that can flip that seat in Ohio. They have really a strong thing. And you have someone, they have the P. Hustle version in Texas with Paxton. So now they put things in play, with Texas for sure.
Let me ask you, though, because what do you say to some of your fellow Democrats who say, yes, like you, they're uncomfortable with Graham Platner, but they would argue they think he's still better than Senator Susan Collins? What say you?
I'm saying, be honest. It's like the only good thing you could say about him is he happens to have a D after the end of his name. Otherwise, what are you going to brag about him? Is it about his Nazi ink? Is it that he used to mock American heroes that don't deserve to live, or he rough up former ex-girlfriends for all of these things? So for me, like if I was hearing that. Well, at least he's a Democrat, and that's where we are, because otherhe's.
Let me ask you, because he actually invoked your name,
and he's actually not even a Democrat. He's a communist. Yeah, that's right. He's a communist. So that's what I'm saying. He's the guy that claims that white people in Maine are all racist and stupid. I mean.
Let me ask you about what he has said about you. This is what he said about you at a recent town hall. I want to give you the opportunity to respond. He says, I get a lot of criticisms. I get a lot of criticisms about the way this government functions, but in order for us to make it functional, we're going to have to do stuff. And you can't just go down there and be John Fetterman and just sort of be, and he uses an expletive. What's your response to that criticism, Senator?
Oh, I'm devastated. Like the guy that, the tough guy that roughs up, ex-girlfriends, and the guy with the Nazi tattoo and all those things. So for me, like, I'll take everything he says as a badge of honor, and he's going to find out, like once, if he does win, he's going to find out he's going to be 100 out of 100. And now, you're not going to drag Jeff Bezos in. You're not going to, he was bragging, I'm going to get arrested. Go ahead, go be a dick and go get arrested. That'll go, they'll love it. Here in the Senate now. So that's here we are. And, I'll be the Democrat to call it what it is. And you will see me saying only positive things only positive things about these incredible Democrats and these candidates, you know, that are here in the map right now.
Well, and we should note he has denied any violence against past girlfriends. He says he didn't know the meaning of the Nazi tattoo.
That's what he does. He lies about everything.
So you don't buy his denials.
What I'm saying, it's like, this is a guy that's been dropping dick pics on Kick for a decade, you know, and now you're a journalist. You all know what Kick is for. And, you know, they have significant problems about being, you know, the predators playground for there. You know, why can't someone, perhaps you, ask him, why did you choose Kick of all the different apps? You know, why did you choose Kick? And, you know, what was your safeguards to make sure that you weren't interacting with people that are at least legal appropriate too? And now we could just drop it. You know, he could just release all of those kinds of texts and he could explain it for everybody. You know, he could clear it all up. But right now, this is what I'm saying. Like, he's an unknown guy that's been lying about his character and his record ever since. Now, I'm sure there'll be more shoes to drop, and it's only June.
Well, to your point, we have invited him on this program. He has an open invitation and would like to be able to ask him some pressing questions. Let me switch to the war in Iran. President Trump says a deal is imminent. Do you think, Senator, a deal is within reach? What have you been told?
I mean, who really knows? And the only reason why I've been the only Democrat to support this, because I remain true to the Democratic commitment to say we can never let Iran acquire a nuclear bomb. A year ago, you know, Midnight Hammer, I was the only Democrat that this the right thing to do, and I celebrated that. And now, you know, with this deal, what it is, require Iran to turn over their nuclear dust 100%. You know, that's what this is really what it's really all about that. And now people that are angry about gas prices, you know, blame Iran, you know, at this point. Where's the rest of our allies saying collectively we can demand Iran to turn over that nuclear dust right now? And now these kinds of countries that say, well, that's not our war. It's like, well, does your nation consume oil? Well, then that makes it your war now too. And if you care about peace in the Middle East, yeah, well, then that makes it your war now too. So this idea that this is a vendetta, no, this is what every single president's been trying to address in the last nearly 5 decades. You know, someone decided to do about it, and I'll be the honest Democrat to just say, okay, I support that. And now, of course, I know how damaging that is for me and standing in my party, but it's not a pro vote on war. It is a pro no nuclear Iran. That's what my vote for this, and I'm going to stand by it, because I'll never be a part of the vote, you know, that forces us to walk away or abandon that, and Iran is able to build a nuclear bomb.
All right, Senator John Fetterman, we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope you'll come back soon.
And I didn't leave.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Still to come, detained in Iran after President Trump told me that, quote, no one knows who is being wrongfully detained in Iran. We'll hear a direct plea for help from an Iranian-American journalist who's been imprisoned there for more than 20 months. Stay with us on Meet the Press now. Welcome back. In my exclusive interview with President Trump last week, I asked him whether any deal the U.S. makes with Iran would include the release of Americans being wrongfully detained. I do want to remind our viewers this interview was interrupted multiple times due to the rain, which you can hear in the background during this exchange. Take a look. Will any deal you make include the release of Americans who are being held by Iran?
Well, we talk about it, and we'll see. Nobody really has an accurate list of who they are, what they are, or if they're being held. But if they're, we've been talking about it. Nobody really has a list. You know that, right? You know, you're asking me about, nobody has a list.
But are you demanding a list? Are you demanding to know and saying they've got to come home?
You're supposed to give me the list. I mean, do you know people that we're talking about? If you give me the names, I'll do my best to get them out.
Well, I don't think that's been reported.
Huh?
I don't think it's all of the people who've been held.
All I'm saying is this.
No.
If you have a list of names, give them to me, and I will get them
But is
out.
it something you talk to them about?
We talk about people if they have them, but nobody knows who they are. Just like you don't know who they are.
One of those Americans being held in Iran is Reza Valazadeh, an Iranian-American journalist who was arrested in September of 2024 on charges of collaborating with a hostile government. The State Department has designated Valazadeh as being wrongfully detained. NBC News obtained an audio recording from Valazadeh from inside Iran's notorious Evin prison, pleading for help and expressing dismay that the U.S. recently repatriated Iranian sailors from ships seized by the U.S. military without demanding the release of him and other prisoners in exchange. Look.
While the four of us are suffering from various diseases and are deprived from real medical services, the U.S. government could have at least demand real medical services for us in exchange for the release of Iranian sailors. Even if treating our diseases is a big demand, it would have at least asked the Iranian authorities to reduce not all the physical pressure and mental torture against us in captivity, but at least some of it.
Now, in a statement to NBC News, the State Department said, quote, "We are committed to securing the release of all Americans unjustly detained in Iran and around the world. The Iranian regime should immediately release all Americans detained in Iran." Joining me now to discuss this further is Ryan Fahey, Reza Valazadeh's lawyer. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's start right there with your client, Mr. Valazadeh. How is he doing, and when was the last time you spoke to him?
Well, we've never been able to speak directly. We speak through his family, which are located in Tehran. Once the blackout was lifted, the internet blackout in Iran, comms came back in, and we were able to connect with the family briefly. And that's how we obtained the most recent message from Reza. He's been held for nearly 2 years within the walls of Evin prison, really, for being an American citizen associated with an American-funded journalist outfit, Radio Free Europe. And he's endured a military strike on the prison by the Israelis back in June of last year. And then he's endured all-out war just outside the walls of that prison ever since. And so he suffers from some pre-existing medical conditions that began as a result of that airstrike by the Israelis. And, he's now in a very, very difficult position, but knows, because of my communications back with him, that I've been engaged in every corner of Washington, D.C. to try to prioritize his release.
What can you tell us about the communications that you've had with the Trump administration to try to get him released?
Well, the day before the war began, let's start there, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, went out and designated Iran to be a state sponsor of wrongful detention. That's directly as a result of Reza's detainment. Second, I've been in Capitol Hill in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I've been at the State Department in the specialized office, the Hostage Affairs Office, and I've been at the White House multiple times engaging at the top of the administration. And I believe the administration takes this matter seriously. Now, the president may not have had all the details when you interviewed him last Saturday or Sunday. However, I believe him when he says that he's going to bring Americans home. And there are at least 6 stuck in Iran, Reza among them. Another gentleman, Cameron Hekmati, a grandfather who visited Israel more than 14 years ago, being held on an exit ban. And what I see is this Iranian sailors, through humanitarian gesture, 60 of them returned to Iran. I see the Iranian soccer team gaining visas to attend a match, potentially even playing the United States in a soccer match. And in the meanwhile, Reza can't even go home to get medical treatment with his parents in Tehran. Keep him on an exit ban if you might, but at least let him out of that prison.
To that point, should any deal, short-term or long-term, require that these Americans be released as a part of any agreement that is struck?
Absolutely, yes. I saw the list of the loose agreement the president seems to have arranged with the Iranians. What was missing from that list is the release of these American citizens, including Reza. And at the very least, while they negotiate a broader deal, once again, he should be released to his parents. He should be able to get the medical treatment he so desperately needs while they work out these finer details. But he absolutely should be on the list of conditions before they get into the broader negotiation.
What is your sense of hearing that President Trump believes that a deal is imminent? We have been here before. We've heard the administration say they're close before. Do you have any sense that this moment is different?
I take the president at his word. He says he has an agreement here. I'm disappointed that these Americans don't seem to be part of that agreement, but I do have confidence from what he said in the course of your interview, and I appreciate you asking the question, that if he has the names, he'll bring them home, and I believe him.
What do you think Reza and his family's message would be right now as we watch and wait to see what happens next with this agreement that seems to be coming together?
Well, I hope they take comfort in knowing that at least the hostilities may come to a pause, particularly when Reza is so vulnerable within that prison. But, you know, this opportunity hopefully will lead to the next one in which his family will ideally be reunited. Now, his family all lives in Tehran. Reza is an American citizen, and so he's likely to need to leave Tehran as soon as possible, and hopefully there'll be an opportunity for them to gather once again together outside of Tehran. But this is what they hope for. They really just want their son to be safe and alive and out of that prison.
Well, we join them in hoping and praying that he can be released soon. Thank you so much, Ryan Fahey, for being here to represent your client. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate the information. Still to come, the World Cup, as we were just discussing, is finally here, and Team USA is hours away from kickoff. We're live at the center of the action. That's next. Keep it right here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The FIFA World Cup is officially underway, and we are now just hours from Team USA's first match. They'll take on Team Paraguay tonight in Los Angeles with about 70,000 fans cheering them in person and millions more watching from home. In a break from precedent of recent leaders of host nations, President Trump will not attend tonight's match, but he is expected to attend the championship match next month in New Jersey. On another historic note, this is the first time a World Cup host nation has ever held a game featuring a country it is currently at war with. You just heard us discussing this. Security is a major challenge for this tournament. The FBI and the White House's World Cup task force say there are no specific or credible threats they're tracking right now, but warn that could change because of the intense threat environment right now. NBC News national correspondent Morgan Chesky joins me now. Apologies for that, Morgan, from the site of tonight's match. So set the scene for us. What is the mood there?
The vibes are high, Kristen. I'm hearing a blend of ole, ole, ole mixed with USA, USA, USA from the kind of crowd gathering at SoFi Stadium behind me. Hard to believe that there's going to be 70,000 fans packed inside when the USA takes to the pitch tonight to battle Paraguay, kicking off their World Cup endeavor here. And I just have to tell you, the excitement across not just here in Los Angeles, but in Mexico, in Canada, in Toronto, where there's another game today. It's something that only comes every 4 years. And so people are calling it their Christmas and then some.
Well, I know a lot of fans are getting ready, and they are excited for the kickoff tonight. President Trump, as we said, will not be at tonight's opening match. Who will be representing the administration, though, Morgan?
Secretary of State Marco Rubio going to be joined by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen. Kristen, they're actually going to be sitting down with the president of Paraguay, Santiago Peña, so they can discuss how to keep the relationship healthy and moving forward in a positive direction. But everyone knows at that meeting, Kristen, that they're all there for the big game. USA slightly favored over Paraguay, but of course, you know, all bets are off when you're on a stage as big as the World Cup.
That is for sure. Let me ask you about security. You heard me talking about that, the backdrop to this, the fact that the U.S. is engaged in the war in Iran, President Trump saying there may be a short-term agreement, but I know that security is a top issue there. What are officials saying about how they're feeling going into the weekend?
Kristen, it's an unprecedented security effort here across North America. It's been described as more than 70 Super Bowls, essentially, across 39 days. We have anti-drone technology, highly restricted airspace over the game sites, and, of course, metal detectors and security guards checking every single patron here. Kristen.
All right, Morgan Chesky, thank you so much for your reporting. Really appreciate it. And you can watch every game, every moment of the 2026 FIFA World Cup live in Spanish on Telemundo and Peacock and in English on Fox. And Tom Yamas will have a special edition of Nightly News and Top Story live from the World Cup tonight on NBC News Now. We'll be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local stations. I'll have exclusive interviews with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senators James Lankford and Raphael Warnock. Plus, Steve Kornacki joins me from the big board with a brand new NBC News poll. There's much more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.